did that discussion board for the class that's coming up at 7 o'clock. You'll notice there's some pictures behind me. Write down what cities you think you notice. We'll do a little friendly competition to see how many cities and which ones you might be able to identify. I have always been a teacher. I ended up being a sociologist, but I love helping people learn things. So there's only going to be one thing that you have to learn tonight. One thing. I'm going to say it now, and then I'll say it again at the end after I've shown you how it's true. I hope that after my talk tonight, you will have learned that as a professional, diversity is a skill. As a planning professional, diversity is a skill that helps you avoid these collisions that I'll be talking about tonight. So I chose a sexy title. It was still long and academic, but somewhat sexy. Frenemies, avoiding the collision in making space, history, and culture in urban environments. And collisions are not very fun things, right? That's the bane of our existence with traffic here. Going in and around the DFW area, there's always some collision because someone was not paying attention and did not know how to avoid, right? We have insurance, so we know that it's impossible possibly to completely avoid collisions, but if you can minimize them, right? If you can minimize the collisions, then it's extremely helpful. It saves people's lives. It costs us less money. It makes the world a happier place. And I believe that is the same principle, that is a key factor when we're talking about planning cities, when we're talking about making spaces. If we can minimize the collisions in making that space, in creating a narrative within a city among community members and neighbors and also within culture, then we can do some pretty great things as planners and not have protests and city councils and things stop the wonderful buildings and streets and parks and things that we can bring about. And diversity is the skill that I believe will do that. I say diversity is a skill because oftentimes I can remember diversity being often thought of as my very presence in a city. So I can remember the first time I fell in love with a city. I was 3 years old. I was in Mannheim, Germany. And I looked up at the sky, and I still felt like I was inside. So I want you to think about a little 4-year-old, right? I'm 5'2" on my license. So imagine me as a 3-year-old, right? I'm this really tiny person in Mannheim, Germany, in this big, big, old city with castles. They're towering over me. And you would think a kid would freak out. Who would think a kid would freak out? Anybody think a kid would freak out in a big city with all these castles and cars and buses, right? We would think a kid would freak out. And I felt invigorated. My dad said I just giggled and I laughed and I was running around the streets of Mannheim, Germany as if I was in my living room. And it's because to me, when you're in the middle of a city street with very, very high buildings all around you, it's almost like you're still inside. The only thing you see is the bright light of the sun and these wonderful buildings and doors, and of course in Mannheim, Germany with the castles, it's amazing. When I realized that I needed to dedicate my work to helping people love their cities, right? So I fell in love with cities when I was 3, but when I realized I needed to dedicate my work to helping people love their cities, I was 21 years old, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to change my major to after realizing I did not want to be an engineer. So I loved all of the accoutrements of engineering. I loved drawing, and I loved programming, and I loved the fact that everything was orderly. And then I went to intern as an engineer, and I cried every day. I called my mom, and I cried every day, and she said, "You know you can change your major." And it took me a while to figure it out. But I eventually backed